Welcome today to Keith Thomas and Tanya Griffiths. They're both Devonians like us here at Blue Loop, so nice to see you both.
Nice to see you too, Charlie.
Good to see you, Charlie.
Good stuff. Keith is the Managing Director of reefLIVE and the Chief Executive of a leading leisure consultancy, Petersham Group, and he's widely known for his experience and knowledge of project development, operational management and the experience economy. Tanya is a director at Elliott Architects, which is down in Torquay in Devon, and they've been responsible for designing exhibits across the globe for over 30 years. They're very passionate about zoological and aquarium projects and have been experts in feasibility, master planning and delivering transformational attractions for their clients. So welcome to both of you. We're here today to talk about the fantastic and exciting new project, reefLIVE in Belfast. So I thought we'd initially find out a bit about your own background. So Keith, you first. You've got a considerable background in Aquaria, so do expand upon that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Well, many years ago, back in the early 80s, somehow I graduated from the University of London with a degree in biology, with marine biology, despite having lost a vital plankton sample under the boat at the research station up in Scotland prior to my finals. But I went on, and after a bit of toing and froing in marketing and retail, I saw a fantastic job advertised one day, or I thought it was, for an operations manager for a new aquarium opening in Weymouth called Sea Life Centre. Now, I'd never heard of such a thing. I'd never been to a big aquarium, although I'd been really switched on to the idea of these things, going to the little aquarium on the pier at Lyme Regis in Dorset on the south coast of England, and marvelling at the mackerel that had been freshly caught and brought in off the boats, and the conger eels particularly. And I went down and met this guy called David Mace, and had an informal chat, and somewhat surprising from my point of view, was offered the job, and found myself starting the summer season at Weymouth Sea Life Centre, now Sea Life Park. And that was the start of my career, faced with a large pile of loose change to count, a staff rota to write, and a pile of sandwiches to butter. Wow. And as they say, it went upwards from there.
Good stuff. And Tanya, you've got, you're an architect by training. Your degree was in architecture, and you've been with Elliott for what, over 20 years?
No, I'm a relative newcomer. Okay. So nine years with Elliott, but the practice has that long history working in zoological and with a specialism in aquatics in particular. So yes, I'm relatively new to attractions and aquaria, but have been gripped by what an amazing universe to try and present to the public. So very enthusiastic about the opportunity that reefLIVE presents.
Fantastic. Weren't you with Foster & Co before we moved to Torquay?
Yes, I have worked at Foster & Partners, and so I've had a very varied background in architecture. But this is something a little bit different to regular architecture, and presents some particular technical challenges, but also some really amazing intersections between creative thinking and building really good buildings. So it's a really fantastic opportunity.
Fantastic. So Keith, if you can perhaps expand a little upon the project, tell us a bit more about why Belfast for a start.
Sure. Well, firstly, let's look at the last point there. Belfast is a gem. Many people have perhaps still a slightly jaundiced view of Belfast, but it's a city that is on the up and up, and in recent years has been a real tourist destination that's been establishing itself, not just for tourists from within the island of Ireland and from England and Scotland and Wales, but internationally as well. And I think that's evidenced by the success of Titanic Belfast in the Titanic Quarter, in the old Harland and Wolff's shipyards. And we started talking to the owners of that site, which is a combination of Belfast Harbour Commission and Harcourt, the Irish development company. And they've made a development vehicle called Titanic Quarter Limited. We started talking at the end of 2017, early 2018, looking at what other kinds of aquarium attractions might justify, sorry, let me go back. Looking at what other kinds of attractions might work in the context of the Titanic Quarter. The Titanic Belfast has gone with more and more visitors every year and is approaching 1 million. But as we all know, developing a strong cluster of attractions in a destination is a way of ensuring its long-term viability. And TQ, Titanic Quarter, have a long-term master plan to centre the future development over the next 20 years around leisure, a new leisure quarter. We looked at Belfast and thought, why is this great maritime city with this incredible heritage of building ships like the Titanic, of fishing, of reaching out across the world, why has it not got an international standard aquarium? It's more of a question why rather than anything else. So we started looking at the market. We did some feasibility studies, and we looked at the successful attractions in Northern Ireland, not least Giant's Causeway, Titanic Belfast itself, but also others in the pipeline. We're aware of the new Game of Thrones studio tour at Banbridge, and other studio-based attractions around Game of Thrones that are being planned. And we felt that this was an ideal location for the first reefLIVE aquarium. Hence, we started a dialogue with Titanic Quarter, brought the city into that discussion as well. And since early 2018, we've been developing, firstly, a concept that we felt deserved to be put out there into the market for a new aquarium, which is a great opportunity. I'd like Tanya to talk a little bit about that, but also going through the whole process of developing a concept for an aquarium, plus designing a building suitable for the location and suitable to showcase that kind of aquarium.
Is the site literally on the water then?
It's near to the water. We looked at a number of sites. We actually sit next to the Titanic Hotel, which is a Grade 1 listed building, and was in fact the Harland and Wolff drawing offices back in the day when they used to design ocean-going liners there. We've actually, in the end, although we had the option of using the water out of Belfast Lock, we felt that there was more water security by using a closed system, and that gave us a certain freedom to pick our site. And therefore we've chosen a location that is near the water, but not actually using that water. Okay.
Well, just from I know a lot of aquariums are sited, by the coast, so they can get water directly from the sea. What are the benefits of having a closed system?
I think particularly when you're looking at a number of different types of in-tank environments, particularly with tropical marine fish, it's a lot safer, a lot better for the fish welfare if we can completely control the environment and de-risk any possibility of any contaminants finding their way into the tank. Certainly, in the past, we've always liked, particularly with native marine species, to be able to use where we can the local seawater. And bearing in mind this is an old dockland site, the seawater that floods into the Belfast Loch every day on the tide is of very good quality. But the concern was more about what might come down the river. Agricultural runoff, possibly old spillage from disturbances of the docklands, and we didn't really want to take that risk, so we have in the end opted for a closed system.
Okay, cool. Tanya, I thought you could pick up perhaps on what Keith mentioned, like generally specific challenges to design in terms of aquariums, not just reefLIVE right now, but generally from your experience, what are the challenges you face when designing aquariums?
Well, we're always trying to balance very carefully the guest experience with the welfare of the animals and the operational considerations, because it is quite a challenge to be efficient and effective and make the whole, the system of the aquarium work well. So I think when we're looking at any aquarium project, quite often we're doing refurbishment projects and taking on existing aquaria. And there is a particular aspect of the new build which gives us a new way of looking at things. But it's always that fine calibration of what's the guest experience, how do we place that priority against making it workable, making it sustainable economically and socially, but also then environmentally. And this is an opportunity that this particular project threw up, which was can we think about that in a more holistic way? So it's not tipped in favour of the guest to the detriment necessarily of the most optimum LSS system. How can we bring those more in balance? And that was one of the really great opportunities that we had here to think about the footprint of the building, bearing in mind we've got a very large ocean tank occupying all of that. And for a normal visitor attraction, you want to optimise that ground floor as best you can. It's your front door, yeah. It's the welcome, it's the sign-off, it's usually where the cafe and the retail is. So there were specific challenges that I think we really got to enjoy this time because of the very special site being in the Titanic quarter, with various challenges about what the aspirations are for the master plan, and then also working within the building to get that real balanced equation between those different parameters. So that was a very particular thing. And we do that when we look at any aquarium project, but this one was a special opportunity, also given its context.
Yeah, I imagine it is a nice opportunity to have a new build, because I understand a lot of aquariums are basically enhancing existing ones or taking over old ones. So that's an exciting part of the project, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think this is also special because it's a new brand as well as a new build. Right. So that allows us to bring experience to the table. And as you've heard, the client team is very experienced, especially in the operation of aquaria. And we've worked with an amazing creative team as well. And between us all, we're really putting together, dismantling a little bit and putting back together what we think is a better way of doing things and something that's fit for the 21st century. And again, going back to the guest experience, the welfare and the operations every time on the decision-making processes to make sure that we're getting the best out of it.
Cool. And Keith, before we get onto the inside of the aquarium and the exhibits and the visitor journey, etc., perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what the aquarium will look like, because I know, for example, Titanic Belfast is a really striking building. So tell us more about how reefLIVE will look.
Well, it's always a challenge for a private sector developer and operator to balance the sum invested and the return required with the aesthetic requirements and the desire to create something that's something of a not exactly iconic, but certainly something which has presence. And we've got, as I said, a great site in the Titanic Quarter, and we need to do it justice. The planners that we worked with at Belfast City Council also had a very clear idea about the relationship between the aquarium building and not only Titanic Belfast itself, but also the Grade 1 listed building, which is of a sort of red sandstone colour. And we've had quite an involved dialogue with them, really, to develop something that they felt did the site justice and did did the project and their aspirations for the project justice, as well as ours. What we have is an aquarium which works over 2 floors. As Tanya mentioned, the entrance on the ground floor. We bring people up to the 1st floor, where the bulk of the environments are recreated, and then down for the finale experience around a big tropical ocean tank, which recreates an Indonesian coral reef, with a payoff, and then a retail shop and a cafe with outside terrace. Total floor area of the aquarium is around about 26,000 square feet, about 2,500 square meters. We've worked very hard to try and coordinate the life support systems and the building services so that they work in harmony as much as possible. So we're looking to try and ensure that this has a low carbon footprint, and we minimise energy use as much as possible. There are a series of environments created inside, which range from a polar, which requires chilling, of course, through to tropical, with others representing the Irish coastline, the Azores, the deep sea, and other environments as well. And some of those are realised with live displays, and others, where it's more appropriate, are done using digital means and other techniques which we've drawn on our experience of working in national museums, galleries, science centres around the world, to try and bring that know-how and technology into the design process for this aquarium too.
Good stuff. You've mentioned before that and I think this is because it's a new build, it's a real opportunity. You're going to be using cutting-edge technology and storytelling. So if you perhaps, Tanya, if you could expand upon that a little.
Yeah, one of the challenges for Aquaria is being able to tell stories that sometimes can be limited to what you can do in a live display. So we've been trying to re-evaluate some of the stories that are not commonly told in Aquaria, and how can we best make the emotional connection with our guests so that they feel motivated and inspired by their experience to understand and have a role in protecting the marine environment. So this was underpinning all of the philosophy, but also to be really careful about the choice between a live display and a digital display to deliver the message. So typically you're looking into a tank at a particular species, and that can be a little bit limiting in describing a bigger story. So for instance, creatures that are particularly large or very, very small, or particular phenomenon. This is another aspect that we're looking at, the sort of temporal aspects of what we can engage with our audience with, and programming the space. So from a spatial perspective, that's our end of the spectrum. How can we make the spaces be adaptable and also allow for programming and changing the story in the future, so that it's not limited by the tank and the space, but it's limited by our imaginations in coming up with those really, really engaging stories that people take away with them and then and are uplifted by. So that's one of the key challenges. If I give an example, a classic phenomenon that we want to tell the story of is shoaling. So that hierarchy of the food chain all started off, it can be as small as a piece of flotsam, it might be the hydrocarbons and nutrients coming up from the sea floor, and what is the best way? So there was a genuine debate, and to some extent we're still having this argument about how best to present that phenomenon and make people feel like they can be a part of it. So how can a human relate to being part of a shoal, and in that dynamic of the predators, the hierarchy of predators swooping in, and make it a real experience. So we continue to have those debates about what is the most appropriate method of telling the story. Are we telling the right story? And making sure that if we're using digital, it's for the right reasons, and likewise, the welfare of the animals is paramount. So is this the right story to be telling? Have we made the right choices? So having that rigor in the decision-making process has been very fundamental to us being able to look at things through a different lens.
And I suppose in terms of education, it's a delicate balance between the importance, for example, of educating people about climate change and also not giving people climate change fatigue. So, and also being optimistic. So how will you approach that?
Shall I?
Yeah.
I think this is really at the central core of what we're trying to do here, Charlie. We can see that people are far more aware of the environment generally, obviously, and of the marine environment in particular. Programs like Blue Planet 2 have really opened people's eyes up, and it's always a difficult thing to engage with an environment quite as alien as the sea. There's almost a cultural barrier that you have to cross to take yourself through that surface and underwater, and unless you are a regular diver like yourself, many people have never really had that opportunity. So we really want to speak to an audience that is aware and is concerned about what's happening to the marine environment, the one that they can see off their coastlines in Northern Ireland in particular. But as Tanya intimated, I think we've all been to exhibitions, we've seen documentaries where you can end up feeling quite browbeaten and almost depressed by the stories that you are being told, the projections into the future. What we want really is not to put our heads in the sand, but to try and inspire people, to show people the best of the best in the live displays, to give them glimpses into environments that they would never ever have the chance to see for real by using the digital elements, and then give them an opportunity to understand some of the fabulous work that's being done by communities and conservation groups worldwide, and a means to then contact those groups and become part of that if they are moved to do so after their visit. I think it's very important as well with reefLIVE that we see this visitor narrative as starting from their very first contact with the aquarium and with reefLIVE, maybe through the website, maybe through social media, maybe through word of mouth, and giving people the opportunity to really engage with what we're trying to do and the stories that we're trying to tell. And that goes right through to after their visit as well. And we are looking very hard at how we can follow up people's visit using the contact that we've established with them, so that we can make sure that they can receive the photographs that might have been taken as they make their way around the aquarium, so that they can receive links and guidance and updates about what's happening in the wider world. If a few people can see this as a way of engaging better with the seas around them, maybe changing their own personal ways of doing things in their lives, then I think we're really achieving something special here.
And do you envisage not just educating people about conservation? Do you envisage reefLIVE being actively involved in conservation initiatives?
I think we can very much act as a resource, and it's something we're starting to talk to organisations about, specifically at the moment in Northern Ireland, but also more widely. I think where our role is to act as a gateway, really, to open people's eyes, yes, and to be able to channel people's interest. But certainly, I mean, everything from being the place where you can gather on a Saturday morning to go off and do a beach clean on the Enfield coast, or things like that. We want to actively be involved as well. But I think fundamentally we're there to direct and channel people's enthusiasm.
Good stuff. And Tanya, in terms of the design and the visitor journey, you've seen a lot of aquariums around the world, as you have, Keith, as well. Which ones have you found particularly inspiring, and which are doing it really well?
I think there are various different types of aquaria. There have been a number of trends, and it's arguably the case that some have become very similar, and there's a little bit of repetition, and you tend to see a general approach. And there has also been a trend towards very, very large tanks with very, very large acrylic panels, which are terribly impressive, but actually aren't great for doing the thing that we're trying to do, which is storytelling. So the sort of big wow aquarium style, has its place, but I think actually, whilst that can be quite an immersive experience, having a diversity of narrative as you experience an aquarium and the variety of species and the messages, that's where I think the real power is. And we've seen with, I haven't actually visited myself, but my colleagues have, and the National Geographic Odyssey experience, I think, opened people's eyes to the possibilities of what is in fact a dry aquarium. There are no live exhibits, but the power and the imagination of using digital means to engage people in what the marine environment is about, what threatens it, what the positive stories are, and just to amaze people. So I think we take from both those sort of ends of the spectrum, if you like, some of those aspects to pull into this experience. And you might argue that we're looking at a bit of a hybrid, but we like to think it's the best of both. And that we can really maximise the opportunities that both have. We think there's a valid reason for having live exhibits, because that's a very powerful and immediate connection that you can make, but it needs to be appropriate. And similarly, the technology needs to be appropriate. It's not for everyone to press buttons. Our audience target is perhaps a little broader than some aquaria, so around the world. And many of the ones that we do are very much family directed, but I think we're widening the scope. We want the credibility of being that resource, so from a scientific perspective, but we're also really keen to make sure that it isn't a sort of sterile environment. We want it to be playful. There's a sensory aspect to the way that we're approaching this, so it's multi-layered, and I think we are looking at the examples around the world, what's gone before, and really trying to capture what are the best things of those that we can build together in this environment, and that's the excitement, really.
And how has I hate to bring it up, but how has COVID impacted the design? Because of course people won't be pressing buttons for a while. Yeah, we've our thinking actually has changed slightly over learning what COVID means and the likely regulation and what that means for our audience that we're trying to understand. So I think that our general approach has been to think less of the spatial impact, although we need to manage the space, the number of people. There's obviously quite a lot of thought has to go into now what you touch. So the tactile elements that we would normally build in, we're having to rethink. But it's thrown up a couple of opportunities that we think are possibly helpful, actually, in a strange way. One is that we have to think carefully about programming space. So it's number of visitors over time, as opposed to how many people you can squeeze in the space. And what their level of enjoyment is may actually go up, because you're not asking people to be crowded in a particular room or trying to compete for the space. The other is technology. So the interactive elements and how we engage, we've had to reevaluate some of the ways that we would normally do things, which we're doing in any case. But are there other methods and technologies out there? So we're really keen to make sure that we're picking up on those signals where people are looking at different ways of doing things, because we want to integrate that into our approach. So I think the technological opportunity is there. The mother of invention, we're being forced into thinking differently. And also over time, the attraction over time
gives us some other possibilities that perhaps we would not have thought of. So actually, whilst it is very limiting in some regards, and a lot of the practical side can be limited, but there are also some new windows that we can look through to see if there's something else that we can add.
Charlie, I think that the advantage we have is that this is a project that will open in 2022 in the spring. Now, we all fervently hope that by that time, this threat will have at least been diminished, whether by vaccine or public health measures or the inevitable decline of a virus in the public domain that tends to happen. But we have to be really careful that we don't design in now elements that will be just as obsolete in 2022 and in the years to come after that as pre-COVID elements might be as we stand here now looking at a further potential lockdown. So there's a balance to be met there. But I think that if there's some good that's come out of this, it is that it's enabled our sector to make a quantum leap forward, really. I used to run aquariums back in the day where the aim was to get as many people at the door queuing up in a line to buy tickets as possible, and then you end up with a 2-hour long line. People would be shuffling around, and then by the middle of the afternoon the place could be empty again. That's obviously not a great visitor experience, and it's a pig to operate, quite frankly. You struggle with programming, staffing, and all the other aspects that arise out of that. Now, if we can now get to a situation where instead of the operator almost obliging the visitor to have to book a slot, the visitor in fact is saying, you know, our culture has changed, our expectations have changed. We want to be able to know that when we walk around, we are not going to feel crowded. We are then reacting to that, and we can then offer them a far better, almost certainly a far more bespoke visitor experience, one that's, to use our friend Joe Pine, a much more memorable and personal experience, which will be far stronger for an experience for the visitor, but a far better business model for the attraction as well. If we can spread people out through the day, we can make sure that the staff are there to deal with them in the right way at the right time, and the resources are put into each individual group that's coming around. I think that's a much better model to go forward on, and certainly we're looking forward to that opportunity. Absolutely.
In terms of, I'm really excited to visit the aquarium when it opens. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about, I know you can't reveal everything, but about some of the exhibits and the stories you're telling? I think you were talking about the basking sharks, for example, which are pretty remarkable animals, and I think people learning about them and their proximity to Belfast would be fascinating.
Sure. Well, I was actually talking to the Queen's University Belfast, to the head of school at Life Sciences a couple of days ago about this. They have a researcher there who's doing a study at the moment of basking sharks coming down through the Irish Sea, and they are ringing the dorsal fins of basking sharks, attaching a video camera to them. And then as the sharks go through their normal behavior, obviously they're filming where they go and, importantly, what they do, how they interact with each other, which we just don't know enough about. And towards the end of their journey, the ring will corrode and the little camera will bob up to the surface, and it's got a GPS locator, and they can pick it up and go through all the film. And they're going to make that some of that footage available to us. So what we want to do is to be able to work with people like that and get some real cutting edge, up to the moment stuff, and talk about the great things that are happening now. So, you know, too often I think in the past with attractions, we all pile all our thought into the opening day, and then we take a collective sigh and sit back and work with what we have for a while. We want this to be a much more live and dynamic experience, and I think we have opportunities to do that, taking the approach that we do. But we're going to be looking at some great live exhibits. We've mentioned the Indonesian coral reef, which is our biggest display, a great big community tank. We will have environments like the polar, under the polar ice cap and up the Alaskan coast, which I've always wanted to do in an aquarium. And we'll have, we then conceptually come down the west coast of the Americas. So we can start looking at giant Pacific octopus in the right context, for example, there. Really important, of course, the island of Ireland has some amazing environments, and we want to tell those stories as well. People have no idea what's just out there in their own seas. And I was telling somebody a couple of days ago about a guy called the solo kayaker, and he goes out and kayaks out to the Eddystone Lighthouse from Plymouth and documents what he sees. And this summer has been so amazing, flat, calm, much less activity on the water compared to normally. And he's been seeing shoals of bluefin tuna leaping out of the water. He's been seeing minke whales, blue sharks in quite significant numbers, things that we just have no concept are actually around the shores of the UK. So if we can tell those stories as well, it's going to be really quite exciting.
Fantastic. And Tanya, we've used the word opportunity a lot, and I was thinking, as a storyteller and a designer, what are you perhaps most excited? What stories are you most excited about telling? Perhaps you've not been able to tell before because this is a new build.
Well, I think because we're looking a bit wider than the old aquarium world, and we're looking to the museums, to the galleries, and more traditional attraction devices, it's opened up some other possibilities. And some of the stories, I've already mentioned the issues of scale. So talking about cetaceans and large animals, but also very small animals. But there are other environments that we can't talk about very easily unless we use technology to do that. And I think Blue Planet opened our eyes also to those very special environments. So the deep ocean, people really, were amazed by the creatures that are there. So we do want a bit of awe and wonder in the mix. So the deep ocean is a particular favourite, and there might be some slightly scary elements in there. And I think another one that I'm particularly passionate about is the green seas. So the role of plant life in the ocean. It could sound a little bit boring, but actually it's our job to make that an engaging part of the equation. So the complex ecosystems that rely on plant life, and actually what influence that has on our climate change issues. And so the whole network of the oceans, the connectedness of the oceans, are stories that are difficult actually in traditional aquaria to tell. Those are the ones we're trying to tackle differently. So they're the things that make it exciting for us, working with the creative team, and hopefully the storytelling will carry through. So there is a geographic structure. We are working with water temperatures, so there are pragmatic constraints about how we present things, but really we're trying to unlock the multi-layers of stories that we can apply and have that very broad appeal and the consistency, but also some fun. Good
stuff. Keith, in terms of the site for the aquarium, will you be looking at like cross-marketing with other attractions, because they are essentially a hub of attractions?
Absolutely. Obviously, the COVID has put a slight interregnum into our discussions, I suppose it's fair to say. But we'd already opened up a dialogue with Titanic Belfast. Northern Ireland is a very close-knit society when it comes to tourism. Tourism NI and Visit Belfast are important parts of all of that. But just particularly in the Titanic Quarter, Titanic Quarter Limited, the development and management company for it, are really keen to develop it as a destination, and certainly we'd anticipate working very closely with the other attractions in there. We Are Vertigo are in there currently, as well as the Titanic Belfast and its little ship that it owns, the Nomad. There's also HMS Caroline in the area. And then more widely in Northern Ireland, across Belfast itself and within Northern Ireland, there are other attractions that we certainly like to collaborate closely with. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a region that has to punch pretty hard. We've got to get people up there in the first place. They are coming, and in increasing numbers. Belfast City Council has a strategy to double the number of tourists visiting year on year in a decade, and the development of a big conference and expo business has helped quite a lot in that regard. Again, that's currently ceased until we get over the disease, but certainly business tourism was growing significantly, and they had over 200 cruise ship dockings in the last full year, and that's a very important part of the picture as well. Plus, there's a lot of people coming up every day from Dublin, particularly North American tourists, and increasing numbers of tourists from the Far East. We very much hope, of course, that by the time we open, those people will be coming back into the market. Although our experience is very much to focus in the first year or two on the local people who have been following the story of the construction and will be working with us and for us. So we would draw on those initially, but then it's very important that we speak to the tourist audience as we go forward.
Fantastic. So I thought, as a final question, I'd ask you both what you see as future trends in Aquaria. I mean, I think, for example, Merlin Entertainments, with their release of the belugas and the project in Iceland, is I think at the forefront of a gradual move away of keeping cetaceans in captivity, which has got to be great. So what do you see as trends?
Well, I'll go first, because I'm sure Tanya would like to talk about that last point. But I certainly see aquariums needing to be very much more aware of people questioning their right to do what they do, and questioning the types of species that are being kept in under their care. And I think that's right as well. We need to have answers to those kinds of questions. We've very much said no cetaceans in captivity. We will not keep large pelagic sharks that ultimately grow too large for the tank. We need to be really careful about this. And as a new aquarium coming into the market, we'll be particularly under the spotlight. And we also then have to, and I think this is definitely a trend, we have to have a real purpose, whether that's in terms of education, whether that's in terms of community outreach and engagement, or whether that's the conservation aspects that we've been talking about. So I think those are vital as well. But then, one of the things that has got us so excited about this particular project is the opportunity to use the great technology that is being utilized routinely in theme parks, in other indoor attractions, in museums and so on, that perhaps haven't been used so much in wildlife attractions in the past. And we've got an opportunity now to make the most of that, and hopefully that will lead to an experience which blends properly both aspects of the live displays and the digital displays.
Good stuff. And Tanya?
Well, I think Keith actually touched on earlier an advantage that we have is that we are taking a dynamic approach. So the storytelling needs to be adaptable, and we need to be anticipating what the welfare concerns are. So size is an issue, as Keith mentioned, and also just being very, very rigorous in what is the message that we're trying to convey, and how are we going to best deliver the message, and take into account always the welfare implications. So that goes beyond just regulation. It's anticipating the direction of travel, and having been involved in the project that you mentioned, please support the Beluga Whale Sanctuary in Iceland, everyone, and how significant just being involved in something like that is when people are motivated to make it a really positive change in that direction, and what it means for attractions around the world, because there's still a very long way to go to put the message out about cetaceans in captivity. So if we can help be part of that, I think that is the direction of travel, and it's important that we keep being up to date with the messaging, having a platform for, and as Keith said, a gateway for talking about these things, and creating that dialogue. I think that's really important.
Cool, fantastic. Well, Keith, Tanya, thank you very, very much for coming along today. I really appreciate it. For everyone listening, both Keith and Tanya are available on the platform to ask questions, so feel free to send questions over. And yeah, so thanks to you both, and we shall speak soon, and take care.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
Bye-bye.